Greetings, everybody. This is Christopher Messina coming at you from the Messy Time Studios. Another beautiful day on the east coast of Florida, September 9th, 2022. I am joined cross-country and cross-border from Vancouver by Bob Seeman, who is the author, among other things, is the author of The Coinmen, which I gather is a rather galloping critique of Bitcoin and its promoters. Bob, thanks so much for taking time for the show.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me, Christopher.
Excellent, excellent. We will dive right in. It is a compelling title, The Coinmen. When did you write it? When did it come out? Has it been received? All that.
It came out last year, and it's been received well by decision makers, not so well by the Bitcoin community. I've been getting a lot of flack.
And by decision makers, so your background is in what?
I'm a lawyer, electrical engineer, and I'm also an entrepreneur. So I've started up a bunch of companies, entrepreneurial companies, tech companies. And that was one of the things that disturbed me about Bitcoin is a lot of people think it's an entrepreneurial technology venture startup, and they think they're investing in something new, some innovation, and it's just not.
And to clarify for the audience, aside from just a bold assertion, how come? Why do you say that?
Well, it's not creating any value. I've spent the last 20 years of my life building companies that create value, where somebody can use the product or service and get a benefit from it. Bitcoin, when you really analyze it, it takes me 12 chapters in 200 pages to analyze it. When you really get down to it, all Bitcoin is a unlicensed game of gambling.
And by Bitcoin, you're specifically referring to BTC, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Not the Bitcoin as proposed initially in the white paper by Satoshi Nakamoto, but the implementation called BTC, which has become just this thing, which has metastasized, gone up, gone down, and it is basically, to the extent that any wealth has been created, it's been a net zero game.
Absolutely. It's a zero-sum game. In fact, it's not even a zero-sum game. It's a negative-sum game with all in the last year, $1 billion of money that's been effectively burned up in electricity.
Right. So that's even worse. So zero-sum would just mean we shuffle the cash around. Well, it's been a net positive to shareholders of electricity generating companies. So
I guess so. You're right. Sure.
There's that. I actually had someone on the show the other day who had with the interesting point that in some network grids, they're actually encouraging Bitcoin farming at certain times of the day to load balance, because otherwise you're generating too much electricity, you're shedding excess generation that no one's paying for, right? So if you could actually model that out, which they do very well, the network operators, to some people that operate networks, it's actually better to have a Bitcoin farm sitting somewhere on the network because they take up that excess and they will pay the utility for generating it. So, but leaving all that aside,
that only applies to electricity utilities that are not connected to the grid. For example, Texas is the only major electricity utility that's not connected to the grid in North America. All other utilities, what they do when they have that issue, for stabilization of the grid, that's the technical term, is they have sharing agreements where they sell it to a neighboring grid or they buy it, and they have to, if they have too much electricity, they have to pay the other grid for taking it from them. So there's not a loss, there's not a waste.
And also, if you're a trader, you can Also, if you're a trader taking advantage of cross network transmissions and prices, you can find yourself 9 years later on the end of a lawsuit by FERC claiming you're doing something called wheeling. But anyway, that's a show for another time. Right now, Bitcoin or the Coinmen or the Conmen, I love that. What is your audience you referred to is received very well by decision makers. Whom do you mean by that?
I'm mainly talking to prosecutors around the world. I'll be speaking at the International Association of Prosecutors next week at their annual conference in Georgia. I've been speaking to attorneys general. I've been talking to a lot of regulators in Washington, D.C. and New York City. They want to get to the bottom of what Bitcoin is and how they should regulate it.
Fascinating. So is your book just about Bitcoin, or is it more broadly any one of these so-called cryptocurrencies?
I'm focusing on Bitcoin because, as you know, there's so many different variations of cryptocurrencies. And what I'm surprised about when I'm talking to these regulators is they don't even understand what Bitcoin is. So how are they going to get their mind around what the other crypto is? They each have their own complications and differences. So I really focus on Bitcoin, and I would like to get a little plug for the book.
Plug away, absolutely. There we are.
There's the book. So you can see the I is a little shaded out.
Fair enough.
So it means something different, and that's what I think of those who promote Bitcoin.
Fair enough. Okay, so
it's available on Amazon.
Buy it. The Coinmen, like on Amazon. Buy many copies. So when you're speaking to a regulator, someone who's trying to get their hands around this, what do you say to them? How do you define BTC for them?
Well, they have some very basic questions. So there's a top regulator who asked me to sit down, and for 3 hours, he asked me progressively more detailed questions about what exactly mining is. He had been asking his staff and those in the industry what mining was for years, and he was smart enough to know he wasn't getting a straight answer. He didn't understand the answer.
Right.
And then when I went through the details of what it was, that it was not proof of work, but it was just proof of waste. It was just wasting electricity.
It's just high-speed iterative guessing. I mean, it blows people away when they finally get it, because a lot of people think there must be some incredibly elegant mathematics that only a fields metal scholar would understand. And when you finally realize it's just hitting the space bar really quickly until you finally get to, oh, it's 600 next, it is just bizarre.
Yes. Yes, it is. And so when I learned that this senior regulator didn't even understand the basics of the first cryptocurrency, how it is created and how the network works, that I realized, wow, the government in the United States, who's probably the most advanced on analyzing this, if they don't understand it, well, who else is going to understand all aspects of it all around the world? And this is why I've been speaking virtually and in person around the world to decision makers, helping them understand what it is they're trying to regulate.
Fair enough. And so do you think it should be regulated, or it's just complete crap and it shouldn't exist at all? I mean, the title of your book would lead one to believe you don't think this is something to be regulated, but it's just something that just shouldn't exist.
Both. I think that it should be regulated as what it truly is. It's unlicensed online gambling. And the rules of gambling should apply. Every country and state has their own gambling laws, and they should apply them.
Interesting.
And should it exist? Well, people should learn what it is that they're buying, and once they realize they're really just gambling, it should be worth what a regulated gambling entity is, or what an unregulated gambling entity is. And if it's unregulated, then it should be worth nothing.
Well, it's worth what someone will pay for it.
Well, I'm just saying, if it's unregulated, then the government can shut it down.
And why do we want to? Should the government regulate trading in baseball cards on eBay? That's gambling. There's no inherent value to a piece of cardboard with a picture of some guy who's swinging a bat on it.
Well, you've got the baseball card, and people value the baseball card. When you've got a piece of art, people value the art. There's an inherent value in it. With Bitcoin, there's nothing. It's just a gambling token.
Yeah, that's fair. But of all the other things in the world people can gamble on, why particularly is this one a major irritant to you?
Oh boy, where to begin? I'm in the cybersecurity area, and almost all the ransomware attacks that are financially incentivized are enabled by Bitcoin or similar non-asset-backed crypto. And if they didn't exist, there'd be much less ransomware attacks. That's just one, and then all the money laundering, tax evasion, human trafficking,
Yeah,
purchase
but
of
people have been human
illicit goods and
trafficking and
services.
evading taxes and money laundering for centuries, long before Bitcoin appeared. So it's just
It just makes it easier.
tool.
It just enables it. It facilitates it. And do we need something that facilitates all these terrible crimes? North Korea is building their atomic bomb using the proceeds of the ransomware. Iran is evading sanctions. Likewise, oligarchs in Russia. It's just it enables a lot of problems.
Interesting. And
Baseball
so you don't think North Korea and Tehran would find a new way to finance their terrorist ambitions? I'm just trying to think through the logic of, I've identified this.
Yeah, I mean, they tried to. I mean, they didn't since the advent of Bitcoin. I mean, take North Korea, a substantial amount of their hard currency assets are in Bitcoin. If Bitcoin price collapsed, that would have a serious impact on the ability of North Korea to purchase items such as for their atomic bomb program.
So it's an argument against a facilitating tool that, in your opinion, has more negative applications than it has positive applications.
Absolutely, yes. And then there's the issue that people who are buying into it don't know what they're buying into. When you buy a baseball card or a piece of art, you know what you're buying into.
Do you? You really?
You're buying a baseball card.
You're making an opinion at a moment in time. I'm going to pay X for Y. You have no idea what's going to happen to it a second later.
Well, you talk to a lot of people who buy Bitcoin, and they think that they're buying the future of money. They think they're buying digital gold. That's what they've been told. One of those two things, a store of value. Well, I go through in the book.
It's not a store of value. Of course it's not. It's not.
Well, exactly. But a lot of people think that. They've been told that.
People believe a lot of things. Most Americans still believe that the U.S. dollar is backed by gold. So people believe.
Right.
33% of Americans believe we didn't land on the moon. So if we're going to go by what people believe, we got a big problem there.
That's true.
And in terms of on the positive aspects, so what I find very valuable about maybe not BTC itself, but what now BSV, which is Bitcoin Satoshi Bitcoin,
yes,
or the original protocol. It's a very powerful enabling mechanism to reduce rent-seeking frictions, otherwise known as 2.5% paid to Visa every time you buy a burger, from all those transactions. So there are massive uses to the underlying technology of blockchain to reduce frictions in the global banking system. And very critically, I mean, in this instance, I will score BTC for high points in Liberty. When your child king prime minister decided to block finances to the truckers who didn't feel the need to take a vaccine they didn't need because they drove alone, and then he ordered the banking system to freeze their assets while their children were in the snow. Good move, great stuff, thanks. The same time he did that and shut down crowdfunding sources, people with crypto wallets were able to send money in the form of Bitcoin to those same truckers. So, there is I would argue, an incredibly positive benefit and a use case for this. And
I agree.
The cryptocurrency, right? You could have sent it in Cardano, Solana, sure. Anything you thought would hold value was certainly a phenomenal way to evade dictatorial, like totalitarian micro-controls of society. So
I agree. What our prime minister did there was absolutely outrageous, to declare the Emergencies Act for some noise violations and parking violations in our capital. It was a peaceful protest. And, First World War, the Emergencies Act was declared. The Second World War was declared when a diplomat was killed in Quebec by the separatists, and another person was a minister was kidnapped. It was for the third time in the early 1970s by, in fact, his father. And now, because of some parking violations and some noise violations.
Well, bouncy
which
castles are a threat to the country. You can't have kids hopping around in bouncy castles in Ottawa.
exactly. Exactly. So I agree that was a use case for crypto, and likewise, I've talked to entrepreneurs who are employing people in Ukraine, and temporarily the banking system's down, and
Right.
they're paying those people in crypto, most of the time in Bitcoin.
Right. So your argument isn't necessarily against the idea of kind of privately generated, privately
Not at
controlled
all.
systems of money. It is a lot of the way in which BTC itself has been a bit of a pump and dump for its promoters. And
that's right. Yes,
that's fair. I mean, I find it a fascinating philosophical point, right? Because we don't stop adults from signing up for an Ameritrade online brokerage account, and if they choose to go on Reddit and listen to what some clown has to say, buying or selling a stock, we don't stop them from doing that. Have they examined the financials of this company? Arguably, anybody that uses technical analysis may as well be an idiot buying Bitcoin, because it means nothing, right? So,
yes.
so where do we draw the line, and why? I guess that's the point. Is your I don't want to put words in your mouth. Is your book about the nefarious uses to which criminals can put an enabling technology, or is it really about Bitcoin itself as being a particularly awful thing?
It's really about the second, but it's an analysis as to why it's not money, why it's not a store of value, how it's used poorly, for the reasons we explained, and then what are the consequences, such as addiction. It's really gambling, and then it's addiction, and how it should be regulated. And really, I go back to that. People have been talking about, well, it shouldn't be regulated because it's a currency, and people realize, okay, it's not a currency. Nowadays, people are saying, well, it's a security, or it's a commodity, CFTC or SEC. I'm saying no, it's just gambling. And the gambling regulators, the FTC and the state governments, they should be looking at it and treating it like gambling. And the IRS should be treating it like gambling.
Well, how would the IRS treatment of it being gambling be different than what it already is now? If you make a profit, you pay a tax. How would gambling?
Excellent question, Christopher. When you go to Vegas and you make money, you've got to pay taxes on it as if it was income, so at the higher income tax rate.
Sure.
And then if you lose money in Vegas, you can only deduct your losses of gambling against your gambling profits.
Of course, you can't go make a profit as a business and then spend 10 minutes at the blackjack table deliberately losing to offset your responsibility to pay your income tax. Sure.
Exactly. However, with crypto right now, you can write off your capital gains. It's taxed as capital gains as property right now at the lower tax rate. So it's treated better than income, which gambling is. On the upside, and on the downside, you can write off your crypto losses against your capital gains on stocks. If it was treated as gambling, you couldn't do that.
This is news to me. Really, I can go punt and drop money on my crypto portfolio, and I can use that to offset long-term capital gains on my equity portfolio?
Yes, it's treated as property. 2014 determination by the IRS.
Yeah, because they called it, well, it was something even more distinct, right? It was like perpetual. Well, there's some phrase for it. It wasn't just property. It was like abstract intellectual property. And there's something weird about it. You can't mark it down on your balance sheet. You can only mark it up.
But that's how it's treated for accounting purposes.
Yeah.
Not. I think that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
How the accounting standards boards deal with it exactly in that kind of way. You can only mark it down. But the IRS, if you take a look at the 2014 notice, cryptocurrency IRS notice, you'll see that they declare it as property.
Right. All right. So your argument is it should be completely banned, or it should be regulated as gambling, or do you have a preference?
It should be regulated as gambling for what it is. Everyone should realize that it's gambling. So parents who see their kids buying Bitcoin, they should realize that that's what their kids are doing. It's no different from betting on poker in Antigua online. A lot of parents think the kids are getting involved in the latest technology and the future.
It is different. It is different because I buy my Bitcoin. Gambling on a poker game, the poker game happens and it's over. I put my money in and I either won or I lost. It's over. Happens, done. I mean, buying Bitcoin in the hope that it goes up is no different to me than, buying a 1967 Chevy hoping it goes up in price. Like, why shouldn't people be allowed to make those decisions?
Well, certainly adults should be allowed to make fully informed decisions. A big problem is kids are making these decisions. It's very accessible because it is unregulated. States should be licensing anybody who's selling. They should license it and license it just as if it was a gambling operation, as if it was a casino based in Atlantic City. Casinos in Vegas and Atlantic City, for their gambling license, they have to pay a percentage of their gross revenue to the government. So on top of the normal taxes a company would pay, they have to pay a percentage of the gross revenue. And India has effectively done that. 1% of the transaction value has to be paid to the government in taxes. And also it is taxed in that way as if it was like gambling. They don't call it gambling,
right.
But it's that way that we talked about. So that's effectively stopped crypto operations in India.
But really has it? I mean, the point is, in a highly networked world, anyone that's clever enough can VPN to anywhere, can trade from anywhere, and all you're really doing is pushing things further into the shadows. On a practical level, years ago, the statute of limitations is over, and I'm an American, and I don't care. Long ago, I managed a brokerage operation that had operations in multiple countries. One of them was in India. And the reason I highlight that is they had, socialist government had decided that they are going to decree, as many socialist governments do, they're going to decree the outcomes of supposedly free markets, right? It's absurdity. But their particular instance was no one brokerage house could have more than 5% of the volume traded on, say, the National Stock Exchange or something else. That's absurdity. If one broker is much better at getting you better prices, right? If I call broker X and he gets me 1,000 shares done at $4, and broker Y gets me 500 shares done at $8, depends on how I'm going, obviously, if I'm buying, then I want to go with the broker that gets me a better deal. Like, liquidity by its nature favors concentration. So you had this absurdity of no one ever had more than 4.99% of the given volume, which of course can only be determined post hoc, right? So they never even stopped to consider the insanity of regulating at the outset how much someone's going to do. Like, if I did 1,000 shares last month and that ended up being 2% of the volume, and next month I also do 1,000 shares, but gosh, everyone else went on vacation. Suddenly I did 100% of the volume on the exchange, and so therefore I'm breaking the law. It was nuts. So to get around the stupidity, there was a practical mechanism whereby at the end of every month, big bags of cash in briefcases would change hands, right? And so it was and no one was, Winston Churchill's great line about a bad law is one that makes an honest man a criminal. That was a great example. That made no sense. Nobody was served by that stupidity. Nobody, right? All it did was make honest people into criminals by just doing what the market wanted. So I'm always extremely wary of the heavy hand of government regulating anything, right? So I get the point, but I get nervous. Are there not already market incentives and free market choices to let people come to the same conclusion you have, which is BTC is nonsense. I'm not getting on that treadmill. Right? Do we really?
I wish there was. I mean, this is one of the things is that almost all the information that people can access is by the Bitcoin promoters, because Bitcoin is a very interesting thing. It's got all the marketing incentives of a pyramid scheme where people who own the Bitcoin are out there telling how great it is.
Great it is, of course.
It's got all the fake profits of a Ponzi scheme. And then it's got all the excitement of gambling, which is what it really is. So all the information out there that's being, almost all, is pro Bitcoin, and it's not informing people accurately. There are no rules which require people to be informed as to what they're buying. I mean, one thing is there's always saying invest in Bitcoin. It's not an investment because Bitcoin is not even an asset, and you can only invest in an asset. An asset is an economic asset, is something that has cash flow or utility. And yeah, there's the truckers and the Ukrainians, but there's virtually no utility for Bitcoin. So the information out there for people is that it's something of value, and I'm trying to get across the message that it's just a game of gambling.
Right. But no one's restricting you from that. No one's stopping you from telling the world that, right? And other people, so you're not the first critic of Bitcoin.
Certainly not.
The exact same thing. To me, I roar with laughter because I was aware of it years ago. And as an asset class, it's got an inherent value of zero. So, yes. In fact, as you point out, if I'm paying to mine it, I might have an inherent value of negativity. Had a very smart guy comes on the show occasionally, does a lot of commentary for CoinGeek, Kurt, and we were talking about this, and that subsidy for the miners who are getting paid disproportionately because of the inflated value. Once that goes away, the incentives for long-winded way of saying that many things which start out as gambling straight up, right, turn out to eventually be incredibly useful. Like we could all laugh at pets.com spending $12 million on a Super Bowl ad because they delivered stuff to you instead of you going to the store. Woo! Right? And for those rational people who lived through that first bust, so I did, I didn't get caught on the wrong side of any of those stocks because they were stupid to begin with. And when someone, it was like Ted Kennedy's father, prior to the Great Depression, his great comment was, "I pulled all my money out of the stock market when my shoe shine boy was giving me stock tips." Right? So there always have been manias. There always have been bubbles. There always have been irrational participation. I just get very nervous about kind of the government stepping in to quote unquote protect people from themselves. I mean, I was flying into Vegas years ago, right, in 2006, listening to this kid next to me who was like a blackjack dealer and owned like 19 houses in Vegas. It's free money. And he was throwing money at the problem. You could show up and get a negative down payment loan. And so long as he was right, it was musical chairs. That was gambling too. He was buying houses, but he had no equity, right? As long as he sold all those and they kept going up in price, good for him, right? And then when they didn't, they went negative, and he lost, presumably. And then the government bailed him out. I guess that's my broader point. To me, your analysis of BTC as being valueless, probably spot on inherently, right? But that doesn't mean, like, for example, the Messy Times mugs, bound to be a massive collector's item, right?
Absolutely. Limited to 21 million.
Limited to 21 million. And I'm selling the first 10 million for $30 and the second 12 million for $48. But if you hang on to this baby, remember, get a look. Everyone can call. It's on Patreon. You can get on. They're going to go up in value. There's no reason on earth that someone should be restricted from buying those, and I urge them to, if they feel that that's going to be a good investment. They might be wrong and stupid, but at the very least, they can drink hot beverages out of it in the meantime while they find out, whereas you can't even drink a hot beverage out of a Bitcoin. So I guess my last kind of thought is, what is your ultimate goal in speaking with the kind of the regulators and the policymakers? A win for you would be what? They declare it gambling and they regulate it?
Yes.
And what about all the other cryptocurrencies? That's all would be bundled into one thing as well.
Well, my view is that the speculative value of the other cryptocurrencies, let's take Ethereum, would be reduced if Bitcoin was regulated. And what, say, Ethereum would be left with is its utility value.
But Bitcoin has utility value. You can use it for writing smart contracts and use it as a underlying plus. Certainly BSV is for that, right?
Oh, you're saying Ethereum
Well,
has value, sure.
So BTC also could as well. You can tie things to it. So is it only the pure BTC and not a BTC that's connected to an NFT?
Pure. I'm just saying pure BTC, but then there'll be knock-on effects. Is that so much of the value of other crypto is based on the speculative gambling success of BTC. And if that speculative gambling value disappears, then likewise, there'll be a domino effect with the speculative value in the other crypto, and you'd be left with the utility value, which is great. I mean, yes, there is utility in crypto. It's just a question of how much utility that is, and we'll see that if Bitcoin is properly regulated.
Interesting. And if that doesn't happen, we've got the status quo. We've got people being able to buy and sell it, and pricing go up and go down, and such is life.
That's right. Yeah, and we'll see where it goes. Who knows? It seems like the governments are letting, particularly in the United States, are letting it to be the speculative item that it is, and that's their choice. Obviously, they're the decision makers, and I'm just trying to help inform them. Sorry?
God save us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate your thoughts. It's. I always look at, especially when it comes to policy. Right? I'm a big fan of less is more, but that's just my view. I also get very concerned of that sort of, be careful what you wish for, you may get it. Right? To me, kind of trying to regulate BTC itself is kind of like squeezing a wet watermelon pip. Right? You may get it, but the way it shoots out and gets away from you, there are myriad ways that happens. Like I could just take it right now. You regulate, okay, BTC, that's gambling. Well, that's fine because I've got BTC Plus, which is attached to a picture of a drunk monkey laughing at the regulator. That's the regulator. That's the monkey laughing, right? So yeah, you're right. BTC, absolutely regulated gambling, but BTC with monkey, that's an asset. You may think my art has inherently no value, but that's just your opinion. Other than it's worth $80,000. So
it may turn out that way, but I don't think so. I think the speculative value of the other crypto is based on the success of the speculative value in BTC. We'll see. And I agree. There's all kinds of unintended consequences of regulation. And myself, I agree with you. I have only come to this in the last 2 years that Bitcoin should be regulated and regulated as gambling because of, and the final catalyst was this epidemic we have of ransomware. It's outrageous, and it is hurting the economy in a very significant way. Most Americans don't know that the Chinese have most of their personal information, and they don't know that
long ago.
Yeah, so you're aware of it, and then you've got these financially incentivized attackers who are taking down businesses all the time. We saw it with Colonial Pipeline on the East Coast, but that's happening every day with insurance companies.
I've dealt with this space for years. If you have backups in a good network, I don't care. So you froze my system. I'm not paying you anything. Bye. Click off. Reboot. Right. So
well, they're getting pretty sophisticated. What they're doing now is they aren't effecting the lockup until a couple months after they have infected. So they infect all the backups too.
Well, that's just bad management. If that's what.
Oh yeah, no. There is a lot of
right?
work that chief information security officers have to do.
Yeah, and I've had this argument forever because I've done a lot in cybersecurity policy for especially shipping companies and others. And there is no cybersecurity risk; it's human risk. Right? That's the cybersecurity risk is long gone and solved. If you do your updates properly and you manage your systems properly, because there are two kinds of companies: those who've been hacked and those who don't know they've been hacked. So
I agree.
And anything that you really value, air gap it. Right, the entire country, the entire world, our entire network, electricity grid operated for years without the internet. There's no reason that you need to connect a power plant in Ohio to a control room in Atlanta. You don't have to. It's convenient. You don't have to, right? So a lot of these headaches come about because of pure human failure, and the Chinese laugh. I mean, I had a national security chat a couple of months ago, a couple of years ago, actually. God, time flies with COVID. And a retiring U.S. admiral said, having spoken to his counterpart, right? Because for a range of historical reasons, the Navy has been heavily involved in cybersecurity of all the branches. And his Chinese counterpart looked at him in bafflement, basically said, if you really valued this stuff, you wouldn't leave it on the internet for us to take. Of course, from America's perspective, it's like, but we put it behind passwords, which is you might as well say is the honor system, right? Which is just a naive of us, because there's a continuum of cybersecurity between ease and secure. I can make anything secure. It's going to be really hard to get to on a daily basis, but I can make it secure. Or I can take everything and just put it on a public website. Yeah. And so to the Chinese, who air gap their important military secrets and think that it must not be that valuable if we're able to access it from Beijing over the internet. And I can't argue with them, right? Whether I can argue with them or not, that's their perspective, and it's real. And they've got a lot of money and a lot of really talented hackers, and they spend a lot of time breaking into everything we have. And if you don't air gap it and you don't connect to the internet, you are just might as well give it to them and send it.
That's right. The Chinese are attacking us every second of every day, and passwords are a very ineffective security mechanism. We need hardware two-factor authentication that works, biometric two-factor authentication that works, and we need to start considering what some other countries have done. China has the Great Firewall of China, which keeps information out, but likewise they monitor very aggressively what's coming in as far as attacks. But what Russia has done, they tested it before the invasion of Ukraine, is they have the ability to shut off the Russian internet from the rest of the world. And it'll still continue to operate. There's nothing like that. No national security mechanisms here in Canada, United States, or Europe.
Yet. And I'm delighted there's not. Well, Bob, and just so you know, like most of my questions are coming from this chat window that just appeared on my screen, and it's mostly in Mandarin, so I'm not sure what they want me to ask you. But we should be honored and pleased that the People's Party in Beijing finds us interesting enough and valuable enough to interrupt. So, well, I'd like to thank you. Is there any final point for my listeners about what's your prediction on Bitcoin? Should they get in or?
Well, I have made a prediction of Bitcoin, a book that just came out this week. It is called, it's available on Amazon too. It's called The True Value of Bitcoin Revealed. And it's published under a pseudonym of mine, Satoshi Nakaloco.
That's excellent. Oh, that's you. That's phenomenal. Really great.
And this book is the first printing of it, available on Amazon, is indeed limited to 21 million. And when you open
it, kids,
you'll see my prediction. I won't say it here because you'll have to go and buy the book to see Satoshi Nakaloco's prediction long-term on the price of Bitcoin.
That's phenomenal. I can say that at this point in history, I am honored to have hosted on my show Satoshi Nakamoto and Satoshi Nakaloco. I think that's just magic. I appreciate that. Might even be the headliner. So, well, Mr. Nakaloco-san, thank you so much for taking the time to come on. And I urge everyone to gather both your books under themselves. And, you know, hopefully a future government will not regulate buying your books as being gambling. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Christopher. It's been a great pleasure.
Cheers.
Learn what Bitcoin is, how it works, and why it matters. Bitcoin 101, your ultimate guide to the fundamentals of blockchain.